to uni, studied music. The idea of being a film composer, it turns out games just came quicker. And I was like, this sounds great. Why not do games? Whenever we play a game, we sign this unspoken agreement to understand that what we're about to watch is not realistic, but it's going to convince us of this new thing that they've done. Nobody grows up saying, oh, I'm going to be a sound designer, you know.
What is the importance of music in interactive media specifically?
Everything in kind of music in film has been attempted, whereas games, it's like the limits are literally endless. All it takes is a new weird idea, because we have this adaptivity to the music. How do we anticipate what a player is going to do?
Rejection is a good marker for progression in a creative career. Could you expand on that a little bit?
The point of it is not to win every single proposal or job opportunity out there. It's more about...
A soundtrack can make or break a video game, and in this episode I'm joined by Sergio Ronchetti, who is a music composer and sound designer for video games. Sergio worked on a few games, but most notably he's the composer for the highly reviewed indie title Eldest Souls. In this conversation, we talk about how music became an integral part of Sergio's life, the general role of music in interactive media, and how to handle rejection as a freelancer, as well as a few tips on how to network and overcome social anxiety. We also question the importance of classical musical training for anybody who wants to become a composer, and much, much more. With that said, let's uncover Sergio's story. Sergio, pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate that. Sure. I'm very interested to speak to a person from the gaming industry that is doing all things music and composing. I personally believe that music, probably is the other half of a good game, right? Because if the music doesn't quite fit, then perhaps the game won't be as emotionally connecting to the audience. So I'm very interested to chat with you. To start with, how did music really enter your life, and what made it such an integral part of your life and your career today?
Nickelback, Silver Side Up is the answer to all of that. Unfortunately, and also fortunately, because it's like, I don't know, love-hate relationship with that band. That was like the first album, I guess, I started like listening to in the car, like religiously, like every time I was in the car, like back to front, like understanding it. I was like, whoa, these guitars are like super heavy. Sorry, I lied. That and Justin Timberlake, Justified.
Oh, Justin Timberlake is hardcore good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate
Justin
to
Timberlake. I don't know about him now. I'm in gray area. But those are the first two albums, which I was like, oh, these are amazing. And like started actually understanding, listening to music. So that's what happened. And then all throughout school, I guess as soon as I could get guitar lessons, and there weren't guitar lessons, there were only bass guitar lessons. So I was like, okay, I'll just do bass guitar. Ended up playing bass for like years and years, and that was my instrument. Playing in bands, like every minute, every break we had free, like even if it was 15 minutes between lessons, we'd run into like the amp room and set something up and play a couple Green Day songs or whatever, or Papa Roach or whatever. Any chance I got, and that's it. Since then, since like 14, 15, I've been playing in bands up until I was like 22, and the last one was like more professional, shall we say. We actually went for it. We went touring, we recorded albums, and festivals and stuff like that.
Words cannot express the emptiness of feeling alone, haunted by the words once overheard.
And that was like
That's
the best
awesome.
and worst time of my life, because after a while I realized, do you know what, I love music, but I hate being poor, and it's tiring. I don't want to be a rock star. I don't want that side of things. Came back home like before I finished high school, and I was like, I'm not going to uni. I don't want to. I want to join a band. Joined the band, toured, came back, and I was like, I want to go to uni. I don't want to be in a band anymore. And that's what I did. I went to uni, studied music. The idea of being a film composer, and turns out games just came quicker. They came sooner. And I was like, this sounds great. Why not do games? And it's interesting because now I'm doing a lot of sound design. I started as a composer predominantly. Now I do mainly sound design, although I reserve a couple of projects that I really like to do some music because I still have that outlet. But that's, And I remember the time when I kind of started realizing what sound design was as well, because nobody grows up saying, oh, I'm going to be a sound designer. You know, everybody around them was like, I'm going to be a fireman, I'm going to be an astronaut, and I'm going to be a sound designer. It's like nobody knows what a sound designer is. But I remember playing Dead Space once in the band like rehearsal room, right? We you know how it is. You'd have these like all-nighters where you like pick a game and you like finish the
100%.
game, like
Yeah,
right all the way through, right? You know what I'm talking about.
100%.
One of these nights was like playing Dead Space 2, I think it might have been, or maybe it was 1, and I was the last man standing. Everyone else was like falling asleep or whatever, and I was just walking down a corridor on the Ishimura, and it was just I was bricking it. I was like, why am I so tense? Why is this so scary? I kind of stopped for a moment. I'm like nothing's happening, barely anything is moving. What is it? And then I started to realize, there's like music in the background. Oh, there's kind of like this weird ambience, and it's like it was a shepherd tone, right? It was like pitching up constantly, like, never ending kind of like pitching. I was like, that must be somebody's job, right? Somebody must do that. That's really interesting. That's it, yeah. And then I guess it came kind of full circle eventually. Yeah, so there you go. Now I'm doing games.
That's awesome, really. And what's great is that you actually pursued your dream and re-educated yourself. I find that very very respectful, because it takes a lot of mental courage to actually re-educate yourself after a certain career fails. No, really, I trust me, I know. But I do agree with Dead Space being a really, really great soundtrack and ambient noise and everything. Absolutely awesome. It's great to hear that game was the one that inspired you. What was your relationship like with video games growing up? Because you could have gone into film and do music for that, but rather you concentrated on games. So what's the connection there?
Okay, that's interesting. So, growing up, my first console was a Nintendo 64.
Okay.
And what's crazy to think now, back then, the cartridges were like 50 quid, right? They were 50 pounds. That's what a game costs now. So I understand my parents' pain when they were like, listen, you already have 3 games at home. We're not buying you another game. Like, that's it. You have those games finished. Play those games. Play Pokemon Snap again. Have you found all the Pokemons and taken photos of them? Of course not. Play that. So I understand that. So I love video games. And I guess I cherish these like few games that I had, because it was like everything that me and my brother had to play. And the PlayStation 1 came, and then PlayStation 2, and then eventually we had pocket money. We could buy our own games. But so it started young. My parents still got me that console, which was very nice of them.
That's great of them, honestly. Yeah.
So I'm totally grateful now looking back. Wow, you bought me 3 games. That's, my God, that's like 150 pounds worth of games.
Because back then they knew less about video games than what we know today. So it was, in a way, a little bit risky for them to do that. But it's great that they did, honestly.
Yeah,
That's
I bet it was kind of scary for a parent being misinformed and all of that stuff. Anyway, so that was it. So always played video games. And then even with my friends, like I said, we'd always have like an evening like once a month where we'd pick one of our parents' house, we'd sleep over, we'd pick a game and just smash it out. Like even if it was the worst game in the world, like we would just commit and then play like FIFA in between breaks, like just nonstop and relentless. So it was always there. Always loved video games. There was no question about that. And then with the music, I don't know. It kind of just happened. Like I said, I wanted to be a film composer. I wanted to be like Hans Zimmer, like like so many people did when I came back to university. I was tired of being in a band. I was tired of dealing with egos, even though I was one, and I fully admit that as well. I was like, I'm going to make music by myself. I don't have to, follow anybody's lead or anything like that. Films, that sounds great. I want to be, lots of money, great projects. It's going to be fun, etc., etc. Then it turns out being a film composer could take you like way longer to build that reputation. There's like all these student films which have like either no budget or maybe like tens of thousands, maybe 10, 20,000, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. It still means the composer's like not paid, basically.
I see.
At least in my experience. And then there's this massive void between that budget and like $1 million plus. And that's when you're finally like making a living, essentially. That's a long time. That's like 10 years.
Oh God, okay.
Video games, on the other hand, there's like opportunities at every rung of the ladder, you could say, right? Because indie studios or self-funded games can have a budget. So it provided more opportunity, and that's what I did. I met John and Francesco, who were also studying at the time, working on their first student project. They ended up getting funding, and that was it. off we go. I was like, great, video games. And I don't know about you, but like I started seeing it as less of, oh, but I was meant to be a film composer. Now I'm not. I'm kind of like cheating, like how embarrassing and all. I don't care about any of that. I realized you know what? I'm so grateful and happy that I'm working in music and audio in some capacity, and that pays for the stuff that I want to do, you know, with my family, with my friends, with my wife, like living where we want to live. Like that's enough.
Mhm.
So whatever it is, there you go. That's the
Yeah,
long and short.
absolutely. No, I agree with you. And to be honest, I think you're just in the beginning of your career, quite honestly. That's one. Two, you know, if we compare movies and games, games are revenue-wise probably double that of the movie industry. So I think you're in the right industry. The gaming industry is going to grow. And I truly believe there's a lot of opportunities there for people who are just starting out and for professionals. For example, you just mentioned Hans Zimmer. I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow Hans Zimmer or somebody as big or as good as him were to collaborate on a AAA title. Because I think for today, there's no big difference between, you know, a high budget movie and for example, a Last of Us 3, you know, if there's ever going to be a day when we're going to see that game. It's a really creative endeavor. I believe it's such an important endeavor in video games. Just again, as we're speaking to Last of Us, perhaps you might agree with me. If you take away Gustavo Santaolalla's soundtrack from that game and add something else, it's just not going to be the same game. You know, it's going to take that 5% or whatever it is, and it's just not going to be the same. I think that made the game. You know, Gustavo Santaolalla really made it, and I believe that's what you do as well. And we're going to speak about your work for sure. Speaking of, you know, Hans Zimmer, since you mentioned him, I believe he didn't have, you know, formal education, formal musical education. And from what I heard, he's self-taught. He had a problem with, I believe, authority. But look at him now. Obviously, he's one of the big players. Problem with authority, right?
Sure.
And so my question would be, how important do you believe, you know, classical musical training is if someone is to pursue a career in composing and music?
It's not necessary is the bottom line, because hi, I'm over here. Again, I don't compose as
Perfect
much
example.
as I sound design now, but I know plenty of composers who don't have that. The beauty of nowadays is the fact that we have these tools that you know, we don't need that. Obviously, if that's what you want to do and you're great at that, then fantastic. You can be like, you know, Will Roger or, you know, Austin Wintory, like people who do fantastic work and they have that classical training. Fantastic. That's still very valuable. You can't fake that either with, like, you know.
Of course, yeah, no, 100%.
But it's definitely not necessary. It's not necessary. I realized some advice I took from another composer early on. I was like, you know, find out what your journey is, what your heritage is, and then lean into that. Like, again, I wanted to be like Hans Zimmer. I was deluded in many ways because I was like, I just picked him because, like, oh, he's the person I listen to the most. And it was at the time, but I was like, he's not the only composer out there. And
Right.
why would I want to be like him? And then you start comparing yourself to these composers and you're like, they've spent decades building this sound that they have.
Yeah.
And you're trying to do it in like one student assignment. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
And it's not who you are. That's who you can copy what they do. It's a great exercise to try and copy it and learn from it, but it will never sound the same because A, you don't have the same budget or tools that they do, and that's fine. That's just a realistic limitation. But B, because you will do things that are so slightly different, imperceivable to you, that will end up creating something that's not the same. And that's fine. It took me a while to accept that that's fine. We shouldn't try to imitate them perfectly. It's more like, where will that lead us? And then, so again, I played in a bunch of metal bands. So all my music, I was like, okay, screw it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use orchestral sounds, but I'm not going to use them in the way that anybody would expect, at least what I would expect. I'm just going to do what sounds good, and that's it. And if nobody hates it and they still keep paying me, then great. Then I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you're going to develop your own signature if you haven't done so already. But as you said, you know, looking at the past work of, you know, big or very famous composers, it's a good thing to do. It's a great exercise, but eventually developing something that is yours, that's a hard one. But eventually it takes time. That's what takes time, right?
Yeah. And what's fascinating about it is Austin Wintory has fantastic videos on his YouTube, by the way, where he breaks down other composers in film and other media. One of them was Alan Silvestri, who did the stuff for Avengers. and you're like, oh, what a fantastic theme. Like everybody can sing it, like dun 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 dun, like so catchy. Wow. Like how did he come up with that? You look at all his past movies, one of them being like Back to the Future, and you're like, huh, this is strangely familiar. Like, where did he get that from? You realize that, and even like with Mick Gordon, for instance, you go back to his old games like Wolfenstein and maybe Prey, you could argue in many ways, you realize that he was developing like the idea for Doom, like every project before, just a little hint, a little step at a time. So it's like, it really takes that much time. People like drilling this idea until they're like, I'm not finished with this idea. I can explore this idea, this thing a little bit more, and then suddenly the right project or the right moment kind of connects, and it's like bang. That's the thing that people connect with. So anyway.
Yeah, definitely. It is very interesting. Definitely makes sense. But you were speaking about the difference between sound design and composing. Am I correct?
Sure.
Could you expand on that and say what exactly is the difference?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, composing, obviously the music, which is the stuff that you can say, okay, there's like diegetic and non-diegetic. Diegetic being stuff that's within the world that they are creating. So the stuff that the characters could hear, the stuff inside of the universe that's been created.
I see.
Non-diegetic is the terminology for stuff that the player or the viewer can hear, but not the protagonist, not the characters in the film or the video game, right? So Hans Zimmer's score is non-diegetic because the characters in Dune can't hear his music in the background.
Yeah, I see.
Although there's some like, blurred lines. There's some interesting movies where that kind of gets crossed over a little bit, and you think maybe they can. Anyway, but those are kind of like edge cases, right, on the fringe. So you could say sound design is, for the most part, also diegetic and non-diegetic. For instance, if I open a menu to change the settings or whatever, the player can't hear that, right? So there's non-diegetic sounds, I guess.
I see.
I've never described it in this way, but this is probably a good way of describing it as well.
That's very interesting.
It's actually not answering your question, so I'll come back around to it. All right, non-diegetic, diegetic, they're interesting. They're very useful terminologies. Sound design is basically anything that's not musical is a good way to do it. It's still audio, but it's anything that's not musical. And again, there are moments where those lines get crossed because there's some really musical sound design moments where you could say, that's kind of music. And it's like, and it's fine. There is no like right or wrong answer. Yeah, it is kind of music. Like this ambience is using a synthesizer and I'm playing a physical note and then I'm editing it afterwards. So yeah, it's a note, it's music technically. And then there are other moments where music is a sound design, like Dead Space. There were so many, it was such an, how do we say, like the music with like no key, very crazy rhythms. Yeah, at least the first one that Jason Graves did, the original Dead Space.
Yeah.
And even in the remake. So, and because of that, a lot of it was just like noises that the orchestra made. You could argue there's nothing really that musical about it. It's more of a sound effect. So there are lines which are crossed, but sound design for the most part are the sounds, the sound effects, describing the actions that are taking place, describing the information that needs to be conveyed, and like the settings. And then the music is the backdrop, non-diegetically.
Oh, wow. That is very interesting. Oh, that was so informative. I've never heard the terms diegetic and non-diegetic before. Not even talking about it. Yeah, and it really makes sense. It's a great thing to know. Wow, that's very interesting. And thank you for sharing that. Speaking of sound effects, I believe some of your older videos, you were kind of cutting up watermelons and making sound effects from different things that you found, next to you. What I found really interesting in that is the way, like, what was interesting is like, okay, it's a thumbnail of you chopping up a watermelon. And it's called like making sound effects for video games. Okay. So then you chop it up and all I hear is you chopping the watermelon. But then you kind of fast forward in the video and it's that sound synthesized and edited into like a sword cutting somebody in half. And then you hear that, bits and pieces of the original sound. And I find that very, very interesting and so, engaging. And to know that an everyday object can actually become an asset, let's say musical asset in a game. So could you kind of walk me through this kind of creative process? Like, how do you go about making those sounds? How do you look at different items and you just imagine them making those noises? And how do you eventually put them into the game, to represent something completely different?
Okay, so what you're talking about is Foley, right? A Foley artist.
Okay.
That's what that is.
This is called Foley. Okay.
This is called Foley. It's somebody was called something Foley back in the day. I don't know, John Foley, the guy who I'm so sorry, I'm butchering his name, but somebody basically invented this back in like the 20s and the 30s when they started incorporating sound into movies.
I see.
They were like, we need sound effects, and they couldn't, go online and find a sound library or whatever. They had to literally record it themselves or do it live.
Back then, yeah.
So, yeah, so they had to find like watermelons and stuff like that. And like, for instance, one of the original stuff they had to do for like rain, because you can't record rain, especially not back then. They didn't have waterproof microphones. They barely had a microphone. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So rain was like frying bacon or frying eggs in a pan.
Seriously?
And the sizzle just in the oil. You start to realize that sounds, there's this trickery, this fakery, right? It's not one for one, which is, there's a fantastic book by a professor called Michel Chion, French professor, and he wrote this book called Audiovision, and he explained it as signing a contract. I'm going on such a tangent, gotcha. I'm so sorry, but this is really interesting.
Worries. Yeah, I'm all
yours.
He
wrote this. He said that we basically, whenever we watch a film, whenever we play a game, we sign this unspoken agreement, this contract, to understand that what we're about to watch is not realistic, but it's going to convince us of this new thing that they've done, right? Because again, I'm going to watch it and I'm going to be like, wow, this sounds so good. But really, it's bacon. That's not realistic. So I've been tricked. If I signed a contract, I was like, whoa, hold on a second. You told me that was rain. You led me to believe that's rain and it's actually bacon. I'm upset. Nobody gets upset. In the same way that when you watch a boxing movie like Rocky or Creed or whatever, the punches still sound like cannons and like gunshots. It's like, this is ridiculous. This is not realistic. But if it was a realistic sound, it would sound boring.
Yeah.
Or it wouldn't convey the same emotion that we're trying to do. So they have to sell it in a different way. Right? So there's all of these. So it's really not trying to be realistic. It's trying to be natural to the universe that they've created. So all of this comes from like, that's where it stems from Foley. I am by no means a Foley artist in any way, shape, or form. In fact, nowadays, I actually probably use like 99% of my work is not recorded by myself. However, I purchased these really cool libraries from other people who are Foley artists, who are designers in that respect. It's a whole other kind of like career in and of itself. Like people in Hollywood, for instance, there are still Foley artists and they'll Foley all the stuff. Anything you can record in a studio, basically, you can consider Foley. So footsteps, clothing, swords, stabs, all of that stuff. Explosions, not so much. Explosions, that's more of a sound design, sound effect. Have to record it outside, you could say, right? Anything that's in a studio, more or less, you can say it's a Foley, and that's what that is. So it's interesting. It's very interesting, and I just went around copying other people. I was like, oh, people used to stab fruit and squish them to get like gory, bloody sound. Great. People fried bacon for rain. Let's do that.
That's great practice.
Yeah, and it was very tasty. Yes,
for sure. Oh well, but I believe it's also an interesting endeavor, to be able to kind of change the sound so much so that you really can't get the original sound from within. But that's really interesting. I didn't know that they used the sizzling sound of bacon for rain. Yeah. That's really cool. I'm going to research that a little bit. Cool. I'm very also obviously interested in the way you collaborate with game developers. To ensure that, their music ideas aligns with the gameplay and with the game, with the story, and also what you bring to the table actually helps them open up their kind of boundaries and make the game even better. Now, I spoke to the developer of Road to Vostok. That was my previous episode, and I asked him the same question when he was creating his score. The score is amazing, by the way. And I told him, so how do you work with your composer? And to sum everything up, he said, look, I tell him a few bits and pieces of information, but a bit of it is luck to be able to kind of anticipate and wait what the composer gives me. And obviously he was lucky enough to have a great composer that just completely nailed, the soundtrack for the game. So that's what he told me. Now I want to know the other side of the story. So how exactly do you interact with the developers? How do you get that information out of them? And then when you have that information, you really have a clean slate. All you see probably are, is a trailer without sound or perhaps some gameplay. So what's the thought process? What do you look at? Where do you search for inspiration? And how do you get the job done eventually?
That's a great question. So
Thank you.
the bottom line is the fact that we need to understand what the vision of the game is and what the idea is, right? And a lot of the times, it's not as simple as like, oh, we're making a first-person shooter and it's got zombies. Like, great. There's way more to it normally, right? And this developer has spent literally years thinking about it, understanding it, and then putting it to paper and then creating it. So they've spent years understanding what their own vision is, and they're still learning. So it's crazy to think that composers have to come on and they have 3 months to figure all of that out in such a fraction of the time. So I don't envy film composers. Another reason why I don't want to be a film composer, because I don't enjoy being rushed and pressured. It's super, super high stress kind of environment. I prefer to work with game developers because we get, at the very least, months, if not years as well, with like breaks in between milestones, you could say. So that's the first thing. And in that time, we ask as many questions as possible, to the point where I ask developers, like, not just like, what is the game about? What does this character stand for? What's their backstory, et cetera, et cetera? What is this mechanic for? But I also ask them things like, what's your biggest hope for the whole project? What's your biggest fear? What are you most scared of going into this? Is it your first game? Have you worked with composers before? And then my favorite question is, imagine we finished working with each other. It's like 5-10 years after the game's release. Looking back, what do you want players to remember or feel about your game?
Oh, wow.
What do you want them to think?
Question.
And all this thing, oh God, you know what? And then they start, and they give really interesting answers. Some of them are like, I want people to remember it like they remember The Witcher 3, like every detail, like really thought about. Or, I want them to look back and think, wow, that was such a fun game. Like, they don't have to remember the story, but they just remember how fun it was playing with their friends.
Oh, wow.
All of these kind of questions, just to understand, like, where are they coming from? Obviously, the details of, like, yes, what instruments do I use? What genre is this in? What time of, like, history, et cetera, et cetera. That's also very important. I think the element of luck, maybe, if I was to define it, is like every project you learn something new, and you have to think less about jumping in, and you can follow your instinct. Your gut gets a little bit bigger, and also with age. And then you start being like, oh, I know what this needs. You're just like, I just know that this will work because I've done it before. I've done something similar. It's like cooking, right? Once you've done one recipe, you're like, maybe that would work with this ingredient. And you're like, I know that will work because, I don't know, 70% of this idea will work because it works 100% for this idea, that I did in the past. So maybe there's that, element of instinct, you could say.
Would you say that when you talk to the developers, do you ever bring, let's say, quote unquote, homework, like pre-recorded tunes or maybe compositions that are really rough, kind of to open up the imagination, or that's completely out of the question here?
If there's something in the background that I've like worked on, like in between projects or just for fun, and I think it might be relevant, then sure. It's not necessary. What is necessary is like a starting point for the conversation to begin. So, and that can come from anything. This is where it can come from, like a reference track from another game or literally any other type of music. You can be like, what do you think of this piece of music? Is this close or is this super far? And then I'll just have like a spectrum, and I'll be like, okay, this goes here, not very close. And I'll give them another track and be like, is this one closer? It's like, oh, yes, this one goes there. Basically, we just get the limits, because having the vision and having the anti-vision is also very important. For instance, it's like having a first-person shooter, a Doom shooter, right? Like what they call them, boomer shooters, whatever. Being like, okay, great. So we have Doom on this side, and then we also have like, oh God, I can't think of another example. Whatever, like Deep Rock Galactic or something like just another shooter game, which is like totally different. Like, so it's not Doom and it's not Deep Rock. Okay, we're somewhere in between. That's really helpful to know what it isn't as much as what it could be.
For me, for example, I think that's such a creative process that I really envy this process. And in a way, I would love to be that developer who would speak to you, for example, in a room and brainstorm about all of this. because I believe it opened, like, I think creativity is what kind of defines us as beings, really, and imagination. And I think that's such I fancy that so much. I fancy creativity so much. And I believe it's a great energy in the room when there's a group of people, like-minded group of people, trying to solve the same problem and working together, be it some are developers and other are musicians. And at the end of the day, it comes out to be a really great and beautiful product. And by the way, it is truly amazing. I just want to say, like, the main theme for, what was it called? The Elder Souls, Eldest Soul.
Eldest Souls. That's
Eldest Souls. I'm really confused because of Elder Scrolls. All right.
Elden Ring.
Elden Ring. And
yeah.
I'm like,
God bless them. Two Italians came up with the name. They did their best.
Well, it's a great game as well. So that's most important. But the main soundtrack is really, really, it's like kind of gets into your soul, to be honest with you.
Oh, thank you.
I've seen the video clip or the making of that you also made, and there's a girl singing this tune, and gosh, she has a beautiful voice. But the way you composed everything, I'm not saying this because we're talking. I mean this wholeheartedly. It's a great tune, and I think it fits very, very well. So I think you guys did a great job on that.
Thank you.
Now interactive media, well, let's say video games, are kind of at the forefront, really. It's the biggest entertainment industry compared to music or to film. And obviously it is very important and it is here to stay. So my question would be, what is the importance of music in interactive media specifically? And how does it differ perhaps from other forms of music in other productions?
Going back to like what you just said, how cool it is to be in a room full of people, creatives, creating something. What the actual thing that they're all doing, that we are all doing, is telling a story. I think every human being is a storyteller in their own way, right? The difference is that I'm telling a story with sounds and somebody else is telling a story with art or with writing, etc., right? But we're all telling a story. Recording artists are telling their story, film composers, game composers, we're all telling a story. So the importance of music is first and foremost to reinforce that. And I think that's what we've achieved already, and many times over, in the same way that like there's this common consensus that everything in kind of music in film has been attempted or experimented with by now, right? If it hasn't, then I'm sure David Lynch has done that with one of his movies, his crazy sound ideas and everything. Do you know what I mean? So all this experimental stuff, it's kind of reached its limit if it hasn't already. Like, whereas games, it's like the limits are literally endless. All it takes is a new weird idea, because we have this adaptivity to the music. So whereas a film, it's going to start and finish at the same time. So the composer can just go ham in between those two time periods and I'm going to put all of this in and it's going to sound great because I know exactly what's going to happen. Fantastic. Games, we don't know that. So the biggest word is like anticipation. Like, how do we anticipate what a player is going to do? And then how do we best describe that? How do we help them along the way and continue that story? How do we grab them in like one of these feelings, one of these states, hold them there until they decide to go to another one, and then transition so smoothly that they don't even notice the music is happening, but they feel it. And all of a sudden we've grabbed them in this other one, right? And then how do we anticipate how long they're going to stay in there before they move to somewhere else? So it's this like guessing game of being like, how many minutes of music do I write, for instance, before it becomes boring? How do I anticipate how much I need so that it doesn't distract them from the story? The main thing, the thing that's in the middle of everybody's discipline, the thing in the middle that we were trying to get.
You had that issue with Elder Scrolls, I believe, you were talking about that you were making it very adaptive and you were creating about 5 to 7 minute clips, not realizing that sometimes the players actually kind of play for 2 or 3 minutes, right? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. I went so complicated with like the base game that I realized that people weren't listening to like half the music I made. And I was like, what a waste of time. Right. But it was because they were really good at the game and the game was designed that way. So that was a moment of inexperience for me, a lesson for me. I was like, I should have calculated that. I should have tested that. I should have talked to the developers more, etc., etc. Again, experience. My instincts now are like, don't do that much. And then in the DLC, I made 3 more tracks and I was like, okay, there's no need for that. In fact, there's no need for all this complicated like systems and stuff like that. It's not helping. It's actually just distracting. It was more for my ego. So I went so simple, and then I focused on another area, which was making the music sound better than it did in the original game, rather than try and make it overly complicated in the system. And yeah, it turns out players were like killing the bosses within 2 to 3 minutes. So I made sure my tracks were like 3-4 minutes at the most, so that if they needed that extra minute, great. If not, you know.
Awesome. That's a great learning experience, as you said. And I think, it's a positive one, right? There's nothing negative about it. I think it only showcases how great players are. But would you say that actually creating music for video games perhaps is a more difficult endeavor, right? As you said, it's so interactive. You never know kind of what the player is going to do. So instead of, like you said, creating a score that starts and finishes, you really have to create a score that either continues looping or changes energy or this or that. So would you say that it's harder?
I wouldn't.
Can we go as far as to say that it's harder, or probably?
Yeah,
probably,
we're much better than film composers. Yeah, they don't know what the hell they're talking about compared to what we're doing. Let's just put it out there. Like, send this to everyone. You know what? Film composers. No, I don't think it's harder. I would say, if anything, video games maybe is more forgiving in some cases, because writing linear music freaks me out, because I'm like I know that this is going to happen here, so it has to be perfect. Whereas in video games, I'm like, I have to get a loop that has to be like a minute long. Like, I can, that to me is easier than like 5 seconds of the most perfect music, syncing it to that picture. Like, film composers have to like find the sync points, like somebody like, I don't know, hitting a sword or jumping or whatever, or the cuts, the edits in the film. And they have to time their music to that. And they have to like record an expensive orchestra and make sure that that works to like an edit of the film that's like not quite there. And then maybe they need to make changes. Like, that sounds so hella stressful. I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that. I can fix that in my audio middleware software, where I like, the platform where I can put all my music in, and then I can shorten if I need to. I can shorten the music in like the blink of an eye. I can add transitions later. It's more forgiving in that sense. They have the harder job.
Okay, that's a very interesting take. Definitely a different perspective. That's just my inexperience in music speaking right there. That's why I'm speaking to people like you to learn and to become a little wiser. At least of all things video games, and we'll see how it's going to go later. But thank you for that. That was very interesting. Speaking of work and rejection, one of the videos you talk about that, actually one of your recent videos, and I found that video rather interesting because you take this rejection as a positive. That's great. But what you mentioned there is that the quote is fantastic. Rejection is a good marker for progression in a creative career. Could you expand on that a little bit and, explain exactly what you mean by that?
Okay, so I try to take rejection, first of all, in the best positive way possible.
We try, yeah, we have to try.
We really try, right? Because it's not easy, especially not in the moment. It feels like it's like a personal attack. It's like, this is you, this is your fault. I think especially in freelancing, we get a lot of rejection. And I think if we're not getting rejected, basically, it means that we're not putting ourselves out there. And the most important, and recently I was trying to put this to words actually, because I teach this a lot to like students at universities or my private course, mentoring courses and stuff like that. Like trying to define what is the career capital of like a game audio professional, right? What is it that they need to learn more than anything that will get them paid? For instance, script writers in Hollywood need to be the best script writer. They need to be really good at script writing. That's like, it's so black and white in that sense. If you're better than somebody else's script writing, you'll get more jobs. In game audio, it's not the case that you have to be the best out there, because otherwise I wouldn't be here, right? It's more the case that you have to definitely have that level, that minimum standard that people are looking for, that professional standard, and that's constantly going up, obviously. But once you're there, it's more about your exposure. How many people are you talking to? Are you networking regularly? Are you communicating? Are you professional? Are you polite, etc., etc.? So if you're not putting yourself out there to find opportunities and not getting rejected, you're not on the right path, basically. It's like one in the same. Because you're not going to win every project. And the point of it is not to win every single proposal or job opportunity out there. It's more about you have a certain set of skills, it sounds like Taken now, that match up with somebody else's project or opportunity. And it's more about finding those matches. For instance, with Eldest Souls, they were also students. We were all students, pretty much on the same level. So we were on the same level, just in different disciplines. So it matched perfectly. There was no stress, no pressure. We were all like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, cool, let's figure it out together.
That's awesome.
Super nice, happy environment. So it worked. I found that opportunity. Other opportunities wouldn't have been for me, aren't for me. Still happens.
Speaking of networking, I'd be probably interested to ask you as well, perhaps a few words of advice. Some people might have social anxiety, or sometimes people just talk for the sake of talking. But sometimes networking events actually are great. And you, as you said, and you're a great example of that, you meet potential colleagues and get work. So could you perhaps give a few, tips on how to network correctly and how to avoid these talking situations where nothing happens, and perhaps avoid social anxiety in these types of situations?
100%. Okay, before I say any of these, 50% of the work is just showing up. It's just showing up to the thing, showing up to the event, showing up online, to the Discord server or wherever you're looking, just being there. Because simply by the act of like you being there, you have increased your chances of meeting somebody and networking.
I see.
Simple as that. Even if you have no plan at all, by you staying at home, it is 100% certain that you won't advance your career.
Gotcha.
If you leave and go to this place and just stand there, you have increased your chances by an incredible amount because you are there, right? That's the first thing.
Right.
The next step would be becoming confident talking about yourself, which is terrifying.
Oh yeah.
But accepting the fact that the way to start is by accepting the fact that you are already a professional. You are not an aspiring sound designer, aspiring composer. I'm studying at the moment. You can say you're studying, but you already are the thing that you're trying to be. You have to get into that mentality. Even if you haven't been paid yet, haven't worked on any projects, it's more of a state of mind, because in order to get to there, you have to act in that way already. If you want to be a composer, you have to start practicing and studying and being a composer, right? So somebody hiring you isn't going to suddenly change who you are. If you're studying to be a composer and somebody eventually hires you and they give you money, you're like, oh my God, this person just hired me. I guess I'm a professional now. I better start acting like one. Like, no, you were already doing it, right? So you're already the thing. So stand in front of the mirror and just say, I am a sound designer. I am a composer. Say it so you hear yourself saying it. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, and be like, yeah, because I'm a composer, or because I'm a sound designer for video games, whatever. Repeat it. Then there's another really good thing. It's like, yeah, that kind of like awkward silences or whatever. And they happen all the time.
Yeah.
It's just, that's it. Humans, whatever, we're strange. It's fine. It's not like you have to fill the silence. But the initial conversation, like meeting somebody, like a really good technique that I learned, that I was taught by my mentors, and one of them was like Akash Thakar, who's a fantastic sound designer, somebody you should definitely try and talk to, by the way.
Would love to.
And he talks about creating an introduction for yourself, so that when somebody goes to you and says, oh, who are you? What's your name? What do you do? Like the inevitable question. You don't just say, oh, hi, I'm Sergio. I'm a composer in video games. It's like dead. The conversation is dead. Like they say, oh, cool. Have you worked on anything I know? I'm like, no, I work in indie games. Oh, cool.
Okay, have a good day.
Maybe I know them anyway. And then you mentioned Eldest Souls. Oh, Elden Ring? No, Eldest Souls. And then whole thing. So instead of saying that, say something that's interesting and personal, again, personal to you. So for a long while, my introduction was, hi, I'm Sergio. I'm a composer, and I live in London next to the most hipster university in the country.
Okay,
it's a really random little tidbit, whatever. And everyone was like, oh, is that so-and-so? Is that what? And they start guessing the university. Conversation.
Dude,
then you realize it's less about like impressing people and wowing them, saying like, I'm an award-winning composer and I've, done this and blah, blah, blah. It's more about human nature to just make a connection, have a conversation.
Right.
It doesn't even have to be about your craft. You're just making a connection. Because the final thing I want to say is like, it's the final decision. You can have all the logic in the world, but the final decision is an emotional one. And that's just human nature. Because logically, why would somebody hire me when they could look at 1,000 other sound designers and realize, you know what? 50% of these are better than Sergio. Why don't I contact them? They don't want to do that. Why? Because they know me. And hopefully they like me because we've had these interactions. isn't that weird? Isn't that strange? But that's human nature. I would do the same thing. I'd rather hire my friends because I know I'm going to enjoy working with them.
Oh yeah,
you know?
for sure. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so basically get out there, just get out there, and it already increases your chance. That was
That's
very
the easiest thing.
elegantly and
Yeah.
eloquently put. Actually, I think could motivate me as well to go out there and pursue a few things. I want to talk about a subject that perhaps you might not like, but maybe I might be wrong, and that's AI. And kind of the use of AI in music and in composition today. And I would like to get your thoughts on that. Do you see it as a beneficial tool for developers or for composers, or do you see it posing, a threat to the creativity and to the artistry?
I mean, I'm not totally clued up with this. My wife is. She's a computer scientist, and
Oh, wow.
we do actually talk about this a lot. Like this idea of AI feels way more like a buzzword. First of all, it's not actually AI. It's a tool. Yes, it's advancing things, but my God, my computer is a tool. For instance, I haven't been classically trained, but nowadays you don't need to. You need a laptop and you need some free orchestra sounds. And it's as simple as that, and some software which is again free. So that has replaced having to go and get this classically trained things in some ways, to be trivial about it. But so I see it as this new set of tools. And yes, it's kind of scary, the fact that they're trying to replace humans. That is a human problem. That is something that basically humans have to stop. It's like, yes, other things could do our jobs, but let's not do that because that's
Right.
not morally right. So that's the whole other side of it.
I see.
It's not as scary when you start thinking of them in that way, that these tools are helping us create better music. And I feel like it's just our baseline is now shifting higher, all of a sudden taking a big step. But then once we're there and we kind of settle, we're like, okay, there's no need to do all of this anymore because we have AI, we have these new tools to do that for us. So great, let's explore this new avenue, because now we have all this free time and free space and energy because the boring stuff is hopefully taken care of. That's my first thing. And then to anybody who's like getting scared of it and everything, is like, at least right now, any music that I've heard with AI is glaringly obviously done by AI, which is going to make us stand out more. So the more personal you can be, the better, because that's harder to replicate if you think about it. So yeah, I'm not worried for that reason. I'm more open-minded and excited and being like, okay, cool. How can we use this?
That's very interesting. A really good take on that. I speak about AI with most of my guests, and to this day, I'm more or less of your opinion, where I'm kind of in the middle. I like it and I don't like it sometimes. You know what I'll be interested in? So you teach courses, right? You teach courses, you teach people music and how to compose for games specifically, correct? Or just in general?
So yes, no, exactly. I do. I teach universities. I teach that subject, and I also teach the business skills and stuff like that.
Awesome. My question would be, do you feel more fulfilled to hear your music being played in the games that you worked on, or the projects of your students with whom you have taught?
Wow, that's a really good question.
Yeah, it's food for thought there, right?
I'll answer them separately. So I really like Terry Crews's mentality, the actor, right?
Yeah.
He's like, he sits down, and apparently, if this is true, he sits down and like watches episodes of like Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh, I love it.
When he feels like it, or anything that he's worked on, right? And it's just like, and people are like, why are you doing that? That's so like self-involved or whatever. Like, he's just like, because like I made it. I'm an actor in Hollywood. Like, this is amazing. I'm living the dream. So I'm going to enjoy it. I'm excited by it. And I love that in many ways. It feels kind of narcissistic, but that kind of, it's like, oh, that's cool. You're
Right.
like, you're allowed to be happy. So I love that. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. This new idea now that I'm helping students find projects and also build a life and a career out of this is super, super, super satisfying as well. I would say that's more satisfying. I'm less interested about my music being in video games, my sounds being in video games, and more like, of course, this is a very first world thing. It's like, as soon as my bills are paid and I'm comfortable and happy and not stressing about it, then the next one is like, oh, I'm so happy now that I've help this developer create their dream and create their game, and they're happy with my work. That's super fulfilling. Like that's the bonus. Sometimes it's not always like that. Sometimes it's just, work for hire, done, you get in, get out, and that's it. They don't, sometimes you don't have space to afford you that kind of indulgence, put it that way. But helping students, because I know how I was helped back in the day when, when teachers helped me and made me feel better about it, that's super encouraging, because that's more about like, I don't know, life coaching in many ways. It's like you just need somebody to be like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You're doing great. Like,
Yeah.
you're doing great. And you're not the first person to do this. So don't worry. It's possible. So you just got to stay in it. And sometimes that's all that's needed. And you're like, oh, you're right. Okay, cool. So it's nice to be able to give that. So I would say, the student answer for sure.
Yeah. I'll probably agree with you, but it's probably a bit more gratifying and warms the heart. Probably just that tiny bit more, which makes all the difference in the world. Sergio, I'm very interested to know, from kind of all the games out there, what game would you like to have worked on as a composer, or what gaming company would you like to have worked as a composer in the best imaginary world?
Oh, that's good.
Thanks.
Might be a boring answer. So for a while I had like, even in my social media bio, I was like, one day hoping to score a God of War game.
Okay.
Yeah. Or to be part of the team. Going back to the introductions, by the way, like I did some podcasts around that time, and people would ask that question, like, oh, I saw in your bio you said this. Again, it was something interesting that people could talk about. Like, people don't put that in their bios, but why not?
Right.
That's interesting.
Why not?
Oh, God of
That's
War.
cool,
Why God
yeah.
of War? Right. So that was really helpful in some conversations as well. But yeah, for a long time I said that because I guess I was playing God of War at the time, and Bear McCreary's score was fantastic, and
It is.
et cetera, et cetera. It is fantastic. But honestly, I don't care.
I see. Okay.
I don't really care. It's because you could work on a game that you think is like your dream game, but actually working on it might be hell.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Look at Mick Gordon. He finally got his chance to score Doom, and then a sequel, and the sequel was a nightmare for him in many ways, So although he fulfilled his dream, I'm sure in many ways, I'm pretty sure he looks back on that and thinks, I hated working on that project. And
Right.
I'm realistic. I guess I'm pragmatic in that sense.
Blessing and a curse, basically.
Yeah. But okay, maybe I'm overcomplicating the question. Like, okay, if it is everything that I imagine in my dream game, what would it be? Okay, it would be something like,
as a fun exercise,
it would be something like Last of Us.
Oof, that's a good one.
Something by Naughty Dog in that vein, like Last of Us 7 or whatever. By the time,
why not? Let's have
by
all
the time I'm good enough. I'm giving myself 4 games to get 5
get
games.
there. Something tells me you're gonna get there much faster. Tell me, since we're speaking of soundtracks, do you have a favorite game soundtrack, or some soundtrack from a video game that you come back to all the time to kind of get inspiration? And if so, kind of what makes it stand out for you?
Oh, that's good.
Or maybe a composer.
One of them getting inspiration from. So it's really interesting, because I don't often listen to soundtracks and be like, oh, I'm getting really inspired. Like, I listen to it during the gameplay and then kind of forget about it, and then
I see.
Trying to remember what's in my head and be like, that's what I remember that being like, even if it's not the case. I just use that. Yeah, I don't listen to a ton of game soundtracks unless I'm actually playing the game. But for instance, the score that Will Roger did for Call of Duty World War II was like forever stuck in my head. And now I've been playing Helldivers 2. I have to curb my Helldivers 2 addiction like every night. It's a constant struggle. But the music in that is very much in the same vein, like his same style and everything. I love that. That's so cool. I wouldn't listen to it outside of the game, funnily enough. I think the only thing that I have listened to outside of the game is maybe like Austin Wintory's score to like Aliens Fireteam Elite, which is fantastic. And like Doom Eternal.
Well, yeah, that's
awesome soundtracks.
Crazy.
I can't stop listening to that. Yeah, I'd say like one of those things. Again, heavy, like dark or like epic orchestral kind of like stuff. That's my jam for sure.
Just to kind of put my 2 cents into this discussion, I find myself every once in a while going back and just listening to the MGS1 soundtrack. I don't know if you played Metal Gear Solid 1.
I did, but when I was like 16.
Oh,
with my friends, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We played it and we did the whole night just like, and I remember the torture scene. You have to like button mash the like controller.
Circle button. Yeah.
So good.
I find myself going back to that soundtrack, and especially the boss fight with Psycho Mantis.
Sure.
That, oh my goodness, that was crazy. Do you know this the story that he could read the memory card of the PS1? Right? And
So
like
clever.
that played into my head, and that's why that song got stuck with me. And I find myself going back and just listening to it every, it's so dark, it's so scary. I unfortunately don't know the name of the composer. I have to double check
I
on
don't
that.
know either. Yeah.
I have no idea.
Such a clever game.
Oh,
Such a
definitely.
clever game.
Hideo is the king.
Timeless.
What do video games mean and represent to you?
Wow. God, that is deep. I could answer super shallow or super deep.
As you want. I
Let's
say
do
this to all
both.
my guests. There's no wrong answer. I just want to kind of dig into the soul of each guest regarding video
Oof,
games
oh my
and
God.
collect all sorts of opinions on what video games mean to people. And I'm just very interested in that.
Okay, I'll give you the two answers. I'll give you the shallow one and the deep one. The shallow one is it helps me pay my bills so I can spend time with my family and friends doing the things that I love outside of video games. And I think that's the most important thing. I think we have to remember that as much as I love doing what I do, and I hope that many other people love doing what they do for a living as well, it still ends up being work because I get paid for it. It's as simple as that. Like that's my feedback. That's my, motivation, unfortunately. And on my deathbed, I know, and I've read this in many books, and I know this will be the case, I'm sure, it's like, you're not going to look back and think, oh, I'm so glad I sunk all of those hours into that project, or I'm so glad I worked overtime and got all this money. And no, you're going to be looking back thinking, I love that holiday, or that experience that I had, right? That's way more important. So it's a job. And that means the world to me because I get to do the stuff that I really love outside of it. On the other hand, video games on a deeper level is my escape.
Right.
It's my escape from reality. Like, I love it. I turn it on and I just full focus on something that's completely distracting from any other bullshit that's around at the time.
Right.
And I love that. And certain games, I like, I don't know, this human attraction to like suffering and stuff like, and that's why I love like Last of Us 2, like had me in tears in so many moments. And like,
definitely.
Why would you want to make yourself cry? But it's this weird human attraction to me. Like, I resonate with that, right? Just, I want to experience that. And I love that. And I don't think you can have that in the same way with films, purely because you have agency with these characters. You are making them do these things. Last of Us 2, like without spoiling anything, puts you in that position so well. When you're like, I don't want to do this, or like, I'm not sure yet. I haven't had time to process everything and figure out where my morals lie. Like, you don't have a choice. Like, it's very interesting. And I think that experience is one of a kind. Yeah.
Well, that's a really good answer. And I have to say that I fully agree, especially when you talk about The Last of Us, and especially about the part where you say that it makes you do what you don't want to do. That's for sure. That's true. Sergio, thank you so much for this conversation. It was such a pleasant conversation. I've honestly learned so many new things concerning music, and it was very, very insightful. Grateful for your time. Thank you very, very much. Wishing you obviously nothing but the best. I want you to completely succeed in your career, in your goals, slowly but surely get better, get wiser. And hopefully one day we'll read your name in a God of War game or something alike.
Maybe.
And I'll be very happy for you if that day comes. Thank you very much for the conversation. And, perhaps we'll chat again in the near future. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. Gotcha. And the God of War thing, like, maybe I won't care by then. You see what I'm saying? Like, maybe that's my mentality. But anyway, these were amazing questions. I also really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm glad I could give you something that you found interesting and useful as well.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.